Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our first Caring for Vulnerable Children Google Hangout, coming to you live from the University of Strathclyde. Today we will be putting your questions to Graeme McPhee and John Paul Fitzpatrick, and we'll be reviewing the content of the course so far. Please feel free to ask questions using the Google Hangout question bar, and we will do our best to pass along as many of your questions as we can. You can also post your questions live on Twitter using the hashtag FLChildren. Without further ado, I will now hand over to your hosts today, Graeme McPhee and John Paul Fitzpatrick.
Hello and welcome.
Yes, welcome everyone. It's good to be here for the first Google Hangout of this run of Caring for Vulnerable Children. We're at the end of week 2. We've had a lot going on. We'll start by doing the introductions first and just saying a little bit about ourselves, and then go there. So my name's Graeme McPhee. I'm guessing most of you will be familiar with me by now via the course introductions. I'm the lead educator on the course. I'm based here in the School of Social Work and Social Policy at the University of Strathclyde.
And hi there, my name's John Paul Fitzpatrick. I am working in the Centre for Excellence for Looked After Children in Scotland, based here within Strathclyde University. And you'll be encountering me in a further hangout and later on in week 5, I believe.
Or 4.
Or 4, yes, just a week out.
Yes, so you'll see John Paul doing a couple of inputs later on in the programme. As some of you will be managing to join us live, so great if you're able to do that. And as Aidan said in the introduction, if you would like to interact with us live, that would be really good. There's different ways of doing that. You can post questions via the Google Hangout bar. We've also got our Twitter hashtag.
Yes, as Aidan said earlier, it's hashtag FLChildren, and we really would like to have your questions posted there, or comments or thoughts as you're coming along. Let's keep the conversation going, because there's been a great dynamic running through the course for the first 2 weeks, and it's great to see that. So let's keep the conversation going. So do tweet us.
And we're going to we'll respond to as many different posts and questions as we can today. It would be, we need to say up front that we're not going to be able to respond to everything. Since the course has started, we've had over 10,000 people sign up for the course this time now. We've had over 14,000 comments.
Brilliant.
So, which is brilliant, but it would be a bit difficult for us to respond to all of them today. So we've got some that we'll be responding to. But if you do contact us live, we'll do our best to speak to you as the session goes on. We've got 2 or 3 different things that we want to cover. We're going to talk about the poll, which was in week 1, where we asked people to rate the different scenarios in terms of what they saw as the most vulnerable. We're going to come to that in a couple of minutes or so. We've also had some questions posted in relation to the Hangout, largely picking up on some of the themes that have come up in week 2 of the course. We actually want to go back a wee bit further to week 1 to begin with, and just to start a little bit of a discussion about kind of some of the things that we were talking about in week 1 and some of the way they've been responded to in some of the comments that have came through. And one of the strong themes in week 1 was about giving participants a sense of certainly the children's population in Scotland and issues of poverty. And also our course is about kind of caring for vulnerable children. And the reason that we think there's a specific reason for highlighting issues of poverty, and that is about the proven statistical link between children who experience poverty and the increased likelihood, not certainty, but increased likelihood that they may experience issues of risk and vulnerability.
And we know that that's the case because of in a Scottish context, and indeed this is the case in most areas of deprivation, that correlation between referrals and to social work services and support for people encountering difficulties and issues, and that link with poverty has been mapped geographically. It can be seen quite clearly that most, for example, in a Scottish context, referrals to the Scottish Children's Reporter Administration, SCRA, who deal with families such as the one that you've been following in the video, who are encountering difficulties. Those statistics clearly tell us of the link between deprivation and, as you're saying, Graeme, just because there's that link doesn't mean that the outcomes are certain, because that depends on individual resilience, individual supports that the families are getting. So there are many complex factors, but poverty absolutely is one of the major underpinning factors of the great risk.
Yeah, and I guess the reason we're picking up that, there were some conversations at the end of week one where we were asking people to reflect on the week, and some people saying that there's the vulnerability and risk isn't increased by issues such as poverty. Well, the statistics very much suggest otherwise. I think what's important to do is get a distinction between, nobody's suggesting that because a family or an individual are experiencing poverty, it means there will definitely be issues of vulnerability and risk. And likewise, we're not saying more affluent families where there aren't issues of poverty, that they won't experience issues and risk, but that we know statistically via the many different ways and systems by which we gather the material, that children who do experience poverty are more likely to be represented in child protection services and social work services. We know that poverty is an increasing factor in terms of the likelihood for that to be the case.
And actually all outcomes across the lifespan, there's the same linkage between educational attainment and poverty, and that's been proven in research conducted fairly recently by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. So it really does impact on life chances and life outcomes. But as we say, there are ways that those effects can be ameliorated and supported through successful and targeted intervention and support.
Yeah. And these are themes that we'll pick up on or we will continue to explore as we go through the week. Jean-Paul mentioned the Scottish Children's Hearing System, and we'll talk about that more in later weeks, as without giving too much away, the way Billy's story develops in coming weeks, we'll get information about the Children's Hearing System. And we'll also encourage participants to think about the political climate that exists, and because we know we've got participants from a wide range of countries, and so we're sitting here in Scotland kind of thinking about the Scottish and the UK context, but we'll have lots of participants from elsewhere, and we'll encourage participants to think about what's the political context in their setting, and what's the relationship between that and the way in which kind of vulnerable children are responded to and the services that are provided for them.
Because the linkage with the political has a bearing on what level of resource your particular country has in terms of the priority given to social services infrastructure. And in some countries, from a North American perspective, for example, the tradition of child and youth care. So there's a question for you. Do you know how many vulnerable children are in your particular community, for a start? And actually, would you know where to go and find that information out? So have a look at your local government, local county, local authority settings, and get onto the website and start to unpick some of that and start to follow the debate, because the more you go through this journey in the course, you'll start to hear more about the prevalence and issues affecting children and young people in terms of the way they're reported in the media. So what, in terms of your own local press, what's been said this week, this month, what kind of press and pressures are being highlighted, or are they not? And is that telling in itself? So we'll come back to that at some point, no doubt.
So will we get to some questions? We've got a cracking question to start with. With some questions posted on the Google Hangout page. So thanks very much for the people that did that. And actually, there's a nice link between this first question and what we've just been speaking about here. A question from Lindsay Fraser. I would be interested to hear views on, this is a great question, is childhood in crisis? Is there an increase in cases of vulnerable children like Billy, or are we just more aware of them? We could do a whole Google Hangout just on that.
Yeah, absolutely could.
So,
wow, Lindsay, thank you very much for the question. It's a good one to start with. So, is childhood in crisis? Well, I suppose that depends on your definition of childhood and where you are sitting in the world, and in what particular context. Is childhood at risk, I wonder, in terms of the pressures that are on society and family for children and young people to almost grow up without experiencing childhood and the innocence of childhood and play, in terms of the pressures that are brought on by technology, the pressures that are brought on by living in a neoliberal economy where you're having to compete for fashion and clothes and money and resources and all of those things that encourage the acceleration of childhood and crisis. You probably have a view of this, being a parent as well, and I wonder, what do you think?
I think that kind of, well, as I say, childhood is very context specific in terms of kind of culture, country. So by virtue of the lottery of where we're born, the type of childhood that we encounter, and even in a kind of Scottish context, about the way that society and lifestyles have changed. So if we just take the example of IT and social media and such like, and children having far different experiences in childhood because of that than we did when we were growing up. And depending on your take on that, you can spin that as good developments or bad developments. It's just as easy to read stuff saying that kind of children interact less with each other in real time now and do more by phones and text and computer and losing some of those social skills that go with that. Equally, there's lots of debates about children being more sedentary and less exercise and such like, and that being encouraged by advances in technology and differing lifestyles. But you could argue those are very kind of, those are very first world problems. Indeed. Because if you were somewhere else, those wouldn't be high on your list of priorities. Absolutely. In terms of kind of challenges in terms of what childhood involves or doesn't.
Absolutely. And actually you're touching on a very important point about the kind of Western hegemonic dominance of the definitions of childhood, and how that doesn't necessarily transfer to the likes of African countries. And hopefully we've got people that are going to be able to contribute to this dialogue, but that kind of Western dominant view of what childhood should and be like, and actually how that affects risk and vulnerability and the assessment of risk as well, in terms of the measures that we put in place increasingly to safeguard children and young people. Obviously a core theme of what we're exploring over the next couple of weeks. So there's lots in that. I mean, I wouldn't say that it is in crisis. I think it's different. I think the pace of change is different. I think our approaches to risk, assessing vulnerability, the responses to crisis and big high-profile instances where there are child protection issues in the reporting of that. But actually, I think fundamentally, though, childhood is still childhood, and actually should be absolutely. We should be working very hard to make sure that that's the case. It's a belter of a question, though, isn't it?
And this bit about risk as well, in terms of how risk is assessed, for instance, in Scotland and the UK, what would be acceptable or not for, let's say, a 10-year-old child to be doing. But transport that 10-year-old child to another part of the world in terms of the norms about expectations that might be placed on them in terms of work, caring, support for the family, and kind of children and you could, a country such as India, for instance. Absolutely. Many children kind of their experience of grown up doing lots of things that where if we were to transplant that child into the UK, would we have alarm bells ringing? Very possibly, in terms of kind of the things that they were being asked to do. So the bit about his childhood and crisis, the way in which we assess vulnerability and risk is very kind of context specific. And I think there's an important point here that as we go through the course, you'll hear a lot of Scottish accents. You'll read and see input about the Scottish system, but we're hopefully constantly prompting people to reflect on, step back from that Scottish element to a certain extent and think about how this applies in your setting and your territory, because the accents may be different, the systems may be different, but we're all dealing with children in terms of kind of how we assess and kind of try and care for them and protect them from vulnerability.
Absolutely. The issues, I mean, I think, and this is something we want you to discuss in your comments as you're going through the journey on the course, but the issues, there's a lot to be shared across countries and across different cultures, and that's one of the beautiful advantages of this particular course is that we've got a truly international cohort. So it'd be good to get your perspective and your take on, are the themes and issues the same where you are compared to other countries? So take that opportunity to learn from the rich tapestry of other participants on the course.
We've got a couple of questions. Week 2, we had input on attachment, we had input on child development, we had input on containment. And those inputs came from Laura and Judy, and we had lots of good feedback on the forums in relation to that. And we've got some questions, and we've kind of linked 2 questions together here. And we've got one from Nicola Taylor asking about when a child experiences attachment issues. And I guess when we're talking about a child experience attachment issues, we're talking about the context of experiencing problems in relation to attachment, and asking the question, does that damage kind of persist into kind of adulthood, and kind of linking that into, we've got a question from Wilhelmina Matthew asking more specifically about a 1-month-old baby who's separated from their mother. Will they ever have an attachment? And all the research and all the evidence would suggest absolutely there are kind of ample opportunities for growth and development and attachments to be formed, and that's not downplaying some of the difficulties that may be experienced through kind of more negative kind of early life experiences, but the scope for growth and development is always there.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's why there's so much of an emphasis, certainly in a Western context, on earlier intervention, because the earlier that you intervene, the more likelihood is that the reversal of damage done to the neural pathways in the brain in terms of those impacts of trauma that happened at an earlier age can be reversed. But the brain, as Judy will have spoken about, is an incredibly plastic, lumpy material that's capable of forming different neural pathways and connections in terms of overcoming trauma and relearning different patterns of behaviour and learning different stimuluses and approaches. So that's why there's so much emphasis on the neuroscience, and the neuroscience evidence base is constantly evolving, constantly adapting. It's absolutely fascinating. I would urge you to have a look at it. But it does absolutely tell us that young people and children and young people are incredibly resilient. The brain is a huge part of that, and there's much through therapeutic work that can be done to support people. And actually, in terms of the environmental impacts, in terms of the context and situation that a child is in, by changing that so it's a more loving, supportive, safe environment, young people can thrive and grow on and develop and do have fulfill normal, healthy, developed lives as a result, and are able to overcome earlier childhood adversity. But that's not to say, as Graham's talking about, that's absolutely with its challenges, and it can be incredibly difficult, and it can be incredibly difficult as a foster carer, a residential worker, a youth worker who's presenting with working with a child or a young person who's got these particular issues. The absolute behaviours that come with that trauma that are quite often you're thinking, why is this young person not engaging with me in a particular way? And it's actually because as a result of trauma, but the behaviours don't necessarily coincide with what is happening or what you're doing, but it's actually triggering something in the brain. It's acting as a stimulus that's causing a particular behaviour. And actually, I suppose all of that leads to the need for better training for teachers, social workers, residential workers, whatever profession you're in, about the impact of trauma and trauma-related behaviour, and to look at attachment and people's understanding of attachment. So it's a very important subject to get your head around.
Which links really nicely into another question that we got from Rose Gardner. And Rose asked if do we know about prospective foster carers or residential workers, or we could expand that out to kind of any professionals involved in care for vulnerable children. How much input do they get on issues such as kind of child development, the consequences of not having a secure attachment, how that impacts on child's emotional, cognitive development, and so kind of what support are people given? Now, we're sitting here in a university. We offer social work degrees. We offer kind of professional training for residential workers and a kind of range of other professionals. And we know there's a lot of input on a lot of these courses around about issues of child development, attachment, containment, etc. And you've heard little extracts of that over the certainly in week 2, as I say, the inputs from Laura and Judy, and there'll be more coming in further weeks. But perhaps the issue about kind of foster carers is kind of quite interesting in terms of kind of how well foster carers are or aren't to support and to deal with some of the behaviour that might be exhibited as a consequence of some of the young people that they're working with, their early kind of childhood experiences.
And that's going to be very much a lottery, depending on where you're sitting in the globe, even if actually you have formal foster care, and in some countries foster carers are paid, in other countries it's a voluntary activity, and other countries are much more progressed and steeped in kind of formalising training for foster carers. So even in a Scottish context, for example, we have 32 individual kind of states that operate all the estate. It's a local it's an authority, it's not a state. I'm just very confused. Which make decisions about services and provide these supports. And actually, sometimes we find that, for example, foster carers might receive 32 different varieties of training, depending on where they stay, all with different levels of emphasis on attachment or resilience, or different terms and conditions, etc. So some do and some don't. It will depend on their situation and where they live in. And actually, we have a very mixed economy here in Scotland, as in quite a lot of the Western world, which is whereby some foster care services are provided by private providers and others are provided directly by the state. And that can lead to differences as well in terms of training or quality of training and qualities of care, in fact, as well. So that's another part of the jigsaw. You see, it's all linked to resources. It all comes together, doesn't it?
And actually, we got a response to Rose from Jennifer Church. Thanks for responding, Jennifer. And Jennifer said she was a new foster carer. She didn't actually say where she's from or where she's based. We said she's been exposed to these theories, but she described it as a quick, I think it's a quick 2 half-day courses. But it says it was too quick and it was a bit difficult to take it in. So there's an example of somebody who's a new foster carer getting exposed to some of this, but perhaps thinking I could have did with a bit more of that kind of sort of thing. Now, on a different level, we have social work students. We can have social work students here for 4 years, continually getting input and practice placements, whereas in other settings, other professionals will have less or more education and training. So I think that this overall theme that's raised by Rose and links to some of the earlier questions about how well do we prepare and support the adults and the professionals that are going to be involved in providing support and services to the children and young people. It's a key question.
Absolutely is, and it's a very complicated area. And actually, you've got the different pressures and different factors, such as kind of what particular course it is, and actually maybe it highlights the need for approaches which have a common core training for anyone that works with children and young people, such as social pedagogy or child and youth care, as it is in North America. So yeah, it throws up many issues.
And again, I'll just say that's a nice teaser for in future weeks we consider some of these different approaches, child and youth care, social pedagogy, and think about what might they have to offer in terms of providing that unifying view of children, childhood, and the way that we should be responding to and caring for vulnerable children.
Absolutely. Now, Graham, just to prove that this is live, we have a question from Susan McGuire. Thanks very much, Susan, for getting in touch with us. And just a quick reminder that the hashtag FLChildren will get your question directly to Graham and myself. And Susan's asking, do you think that some of the stats showing a statistical link between poverty and risk could be to do with the concentration of attention and lack of faith on parents from poorer backgrounds? That's a really interesting question, Susan, because we know that the simplistic thing to do in a society is to say, oh, it's all the parents' fault, it's poor parenting, and just demonize parents and carers that way. Graham, what do you think as an initial hearing that? question.
But I would absolutely agree. I think there's not just the potential for parents when children are experiencing difficulties, let's put it that way, that I think it's far too easy to start to blame and demonise parents. And I get a little kind of soapbox for a second in a Scottish and a UK context. I worry that there's more of that going on just now than ever in relation in terms of kind of how we respond to some of the children and young people that we're working with. But I think it's less about blame and more about us trying to understand the very real pressures and limitations which certain communities and individuals within communities face when there's such a lack of resources and opportunities and space and time for parents to interact with and provide children with the opportunities that we know they need to help them.
Absolutely. Informal supports before a family or a parent or a child is experiencing absolute kind of risk and a situation is very difficult. So where have we, this goes back to your point earlier about the political and the impacts of the way that decisions are made, the impacts on services, are there opportunities for parents to have mutual support? Are we investing in childcare, after school provision, informal community-based supports and resources whereby parents can work on their own skills, can look at their parenting, can look at the supports, can just actually have alternate sources of leisure facilities, sports facilities to safeguard their own development and mental health issues and also support their children. And in poorer communities, quite often, certainly in a Western context, be very interested to hear about your own experiences. That they are the services that are most likely to be cut because they're non-statutory. Yeah. So it's far too simplistic, I think, it's a really good question, just to blame the parents.
And sadly, in a UK context, what we do know that within the current pattern of budget cuts and services that are being closed, we know for a fact that predominantly the services that are being closed are those that are being offered to the families and communities that need them most. And so, for instance, we know that the kind of proportionally income is dropping at a higher percentage for families who have less. They're more affected by the cuts and the families have more resources in the first place. So it feels like to a certain extent we're in an ever decreasing circle at this point about where do we think this is going to lead.
It'll all be different when Graham is the Prime Minister of the country. It'll all be different. But moving on from that to the poll.
We had the poll. So just to remind people about the poll from week one, we presented you with 10 very short scenarios, and we acknowledged that. And there was a couple of comments saying I would have needed more information. And I think this sort of exercise, we can always say we would have needed more information. So it's purposely, it's 10 small scenarios. Now, if you haven't seen this already, we closed the poll yesterday, and the results are now available on the page in week one. So if you go back to the poll in week one, you'll see the results there, and you'll see a little bit of commentary in terms of our analysis of that. Now, we presented 10 scenarios. What's interesting, well, we had 4 scenarios between them that accounted for a vast proportion of all the votes that were cast. The scenario which got really kind of far and away the most responses was scenario number 1, the tiny baby that had been given a violent shaking by their carer who had learning difficulties, and they were upset because the baby wouldn't stop crying. In second place was a 6-month-old baby boy who had not had any attention or anything to eat for 18 hours. And in third place, we had the 4-year-old girl who has a mother who is suffering from depression and who has not bothered to feed her for 24 hours. So now, also, we're asking people to vote. We don't know people's reasoning or thinking. We're kind of we're trying to read into it.
Absolutely.
I guess the immediate thing that strikes me is that it's not an exact rule of thumb, but there's a common theme in those 3 most kind of young children age. We've got a tiny baby, 6-month-old, and a 4-year-old girl. So in terms of kind of agency and the ability to flag things up for themselves. And whenever we'll get 3 scenarios where we'll get children who are possibly at an aging stage where there's no ability to do that. We have got, in 2 of the scenarios, the tiny baby and the 4-year-old girl. In the first one, we've got a carer with learning difficulties, and the third one, we've got a mother. So how does it describe it again? A depression is not brought to Phoebe for 24 hours. So is there a common theme there in terms of the ability of the caregiver to actually understand and be available for the child and provide them with what they need? So I'm wondering if those have been kind of some of the biggest influences.
Big strong influences of perception of risk in terms of age and stage of the child and the child's ability to articulate their needs, and people responding to that vulnerability. So that, I thought that was just very, very interesting.
Yeah.
But just for the sake of playing devil's advocate briefly.
Surely not.
No, surely we are going to, and don't call me Shirley. That was a very bad joke, and we'll never do that again. But just in terms of playing devil's advocate, there was the one that got the least votes. So this was the 8-year-old girl who was of Afro-Caribbean origin, who had just had her hair cut short because her white foster carer finds it difficult to manage. Now, you've assessed that as, for whatever reason, as being quite low in risk. But I think there's some interesting things going on there about that could be a huge issue for that girl. It could be affecting her attendance at school. It could be an issue where it's part of a pattern of behaviour, which shows that culturally her needs aren't being particularly met. So again, we've only given you a bit of a story, but I just thought that was interesting. I'd love to know your thoughts and experiences if anyone's been experiencing kind of similar issues. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting that got the least love from all of our course participants.
Yeah, and especially linking that to one of the inputs this week, thinking about child development and then kind of children's identity and how that kind of healthy growth and development, and about, I think you used a real good phrase there, if that's part of a pattern of behaviour, that this is indicative of that pattern of behaviour, what's the long-term impact of that on that young girl's development?
In terms of cultural identity and sense of identity and security in who they are and what they are, and so it's interesting. So highlight some of the factors that we just need to think about.
And I get one other thing that is perhaps frustrating, that the scenario that got the 4th most votes, 15-year-old girl recently been befriended by a man who persuaded her to do sexual things to him in exchange for money and affection. Now, again, we don't know why people are voting for that, but I'm wondering, because it's just kind of 2 things jump out at me. Are people being influenced? What's the biggest factor causing people to vote for this? Is it about it being a man, or is it about the persuasion, the power bit? And on the course page, I made the suggestion, if we to switch a man with a 16-year-old boy or girl, what difference, what kind of different perspective would that provide for people within this? Again, to emphasise that there's no right or wrong answers here. We introduced this exercise in week 1 because we want to get people to begin to explore and think about,
debate, and be critical and develop your critical thinking about the range of issues that are inherent in all of these different scenarios. So
now, as the course goes on, there'll be some other polls come up in further weeks, and we'll have the chance to speak about them in future kind of Google Hangouts. So we look forward to getting the chance to do that. Now, I'm aware we're coming towards the end of the time.
We are. I've just very briefly before we do, I need to thank Ellie Russell for her question. Ellie, thank you. Ellie lived in a small country town in Australia and had very low socioeconomic areas that she was staying in, and she found a real difference in expectations for the people from low social economic backgrounds as opposed to the experiences of her that she benefited from in terms of education and family. Teachers didn't treat us the teachers really did treat us in a different way, with different and higher expectations. So different expectations for different students being a factor, and absolutely, I think in terms of, we need to guard, regardless of what profession you're in, against having lower aspirations for anyone. We need to have the same high, equal aspirations for all our children and young people, regardless of where they're from, and because they all have potential to grow and to develop. So I think that's a very important point.
And that we can make a real connection between that and some of the evidence that we have from children who've lived in residential childcare and them reflecting upon their experience of education and feeling they were being treated differently in school and by teachers because the notion was, well, you're in care, so you're going to behave in a certain way and you're not going to achieve kind of certain things. And there's lots of research evidence from lots of young people telling us that they've experienced kind of life in that way.
And that links directly to the issues we were talking earlier about trauma, resilience, attachment. What impact does that stigma have on children and young people when they think they're being perceived differently or treated differently as a result of being care experienced? So something to think about there as well. Gosh.
Right. So what we like to keep the conversations going. You can watch the Google Hangout back if you want to listen to it all again. The comments page is still down there at the bottom. We keep the conversation going. Feel free to come back and disagree with us.
Yeah, do that. Challenge. Just get involved.
Have some different conversations. Hopefully, we'll be looking forward to week 3. The focus in week 3 is communication and how we communicate with children and young people. There's an excellent input from Moira Hawthorne, which I'm sure the participants will enjoy. And we'll have another couple of Google Hangouts as the course goes on. So look out for the information about those, and you'll get some reminder emails as well. But for the time being, thanks very much for your participation.
Stay involved.
Cheers.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you, John Paul, and thank you to everyone at home who tuned in today. We hope you're enjoying the course, and we would welcome any feedback you may have. You can use Twitter to contact us with any feedback or comments you may have using the hashtag FLChildren. From all of us here in Glasgow, thank you and goodbye.